Today, Apple didn't just announce new AirPods, it also put its spotlight on two new MacBook Pros. They'll be powered by a new generation of chips that Apple says shocked the PC world. And car rental company Hertz is filing for another IPO. It's after recovering from its recent bankruptcy. But is it a good buy? Good evening. Great to have you with us. I'm Paul Graney. Hertz has rebounded after its recent bankruptcy. Now it's filing for a new IPO. But is it a good buy? And what's the state of the company in general? NTD's Fake Quarter takes a look.
Hertz is trying to go public again.
This is a company that has had nothing but trouble over the last decade. They made a series of, I think you best can describe them as almost boneheaded moves. They got deeply into debt. They made a lot of mistakes. Now they're trying to straighten it up. They need cash.
Paul Eisenstein is the publisher and editor-in-chief of the Detroit Bureau. He says an IPO seems to be the best way for Hertz to replenish its coffers after its bankruptcy in May of last year. Eisenstein doesn't know if the market will accept Hertz after all the mistakes it's made.
They overexpanded. They spent too much money. They went deeply into debt. They had too large a fleet of vehicles and so on. And bottom line was they just couldn't generate enough revenue to pay off their debt, never mind have a consistent operating profit.
Hertz's previous shareholders were decimated by the bankruptcy, including Carl Icahn, who lost $2 billion. Afterwards, retail investors suddenly started buying Hertz, making it a meme stock like GameStop.
I want to hear more about what the strategy is going forward for Hertz. How are they going to avoid making the same mistakes that they did prior to the pandemic and their bankruptcy? Now, I do have a lot of faith in their new interim CEO, Mark Fields, the former head of Ford Motor Company. That's a good sign. They brought in a guy who is very, very adept at fixing problem companies.
In Hertz's latest quarter, it reported an operating profit larger than pre-pandemic numbers, as well as a net loss of $168 million because of $633 million in reorganization expenses. Fake Quarter, NTD News.
And Facebook plans to create 10,000 jobs in Europe over the next 5 years to build what it calls a metaverse. Mark Zuckerberg has talked up the idea of a metaverse since July. It's an online world where people would use different devices to move and communicate in a virtual environment. It wouldn't be exclusive to Facebook, with Microsoft and others making their own plans. The aim is to mimic the experience of interacting in person. Facebook has already invested heavily in virtual reality. It owns companies like Oculus that makes virtual reality headsets, which could be used to explore the metaverse. And Apple held a virtual event today called Unleashed. Many believe it refers to the new chips the company revealed. Here's NTD's Evelyn Lee with what it means for the two new MacBook Pros.
Apple's Unleashed event just revealed its two new MacBook Pros. Many believe that Unleashed refers to the new M1 Pro and M1 Max chips, its highest-end chips so far.
So today we're launching not one, but two new chips for the Mac.
Johnny Soroji, the senior vice president of hardware technology, says that the new chips use 70% less power and deliver more performance than their predecessor. Apple says the new chips open up a lot of new possibilities on a laptop. Apple is now also targeting customers like photographers and developers who need a lot more horsepower.
For the first time, musicians will be able to create massive spatial audio mixes on a notebook. In Final Cut Pro, video analysis for the new object tracking feature is up to 5 times faster. And in Compressor, ProRes video transcode is a remarkable 10 times faster.
Although iPhones are Apple's most profitable product, MacBooks remain an important part of its business. The new premium product is also moving away from adapters. The new model has ports including HDMI and an SD card slot for photographers. This was Apple's second event this fall. It now has new iPhones, Apple Watches, Macs, and AirPods, all in time for the holiday season. The 14-inch MacBook Pro will start at $1,999 and the 16-inch at $2,499. Evelyn Lee, NTD News.
And Amazon says it plans to hire 150,000 seasonal workers in the United States during the holiday period, preparing for a busy shopping season, expecting high demand, but also supply issues. Last year, the company announced 100,000 seasonal jobs. That was after it had already increased staffing through the pandemic. Amazon's hiring plan comes during a major labor shortage and increased union activity. Leading companies are now increasing wages to attract workers. Last month, Amazon increased its average starting wage in the U.S. to more than $18 an hour. The seasonal roles will also include signing bonuses of up to $3,000. And a threatened strike to shut down TV and film production was averted just hours before the midnight deadline on Saturday. Negotiators say the deal between producers and a major union representing technicians and set workers is something like out of a Hollywood movie. The union had threatened a walkout over benefits, wages, and safety standards, but while the exact details aren't being released, film and TV production is expected to be able to continue. The deal only applies to West Coast production as negotiations continue for workers in other parts of the country. Union members will also need to ratify the agreement before it becomes official. And the CEO of Delta Airlines says he won't enforce a vaccine mandate on employees. He says he takes pride in the vaccine rate the company has achieved without forceful measures. He says the company's vaccination rate is over 90%. He also expects it to rise 5% within the next month. He told Fox News that people who need religious or medical exemptions from vaccination will be accommodated. He says getting a high rate of vaccination by trusting employees, working collaboratively, and respecting everybody's decisions. He considers a vaccine mandate divisive. But Delta were the airline who announced in August that employees would have to pay higher health insurance premiums if not vaccinated by November. So joining us to discuss vaccine mandates for American businesses is Eric Casaburi. Casaburi founded Retro Fitness and grew it to a $150 million a year business with over 150 locations. He's now with Serotonin Anti-Aging Centers. Eric, real pleasure to see you. You're kind of at the forefront in a certain sense of this with healthcare and gyms and similar types of businesses, but at the same time you're a little on edge about these types of vaccine mandates. I assume you don't want to encroach on people's personal freedoms, but how difficult has it been for you to balance these two concerns?
Well, thank you for that great introduction. I will tell you that when the mandate came out, I had a big concern being a franchisor for many years and having multiple brands. I've always thought about small business owners, and when they started talking about these types of things, I just started to think about myself when I started my own businesses and running employees, and as a chief executive officer or as a small business owner, there's a lot of things already on your plate which you're managing and dealing with, running a business. Having something external like this become part of managing that business, and this is something that could be out of the control of any of your normal controllables, was very concerning for me. And I think it's concerning for a lot of people. I mean, it's become a lot of dinner and coffee, tea conversation. I was at a wedding this weekend. This was the topic of the conversation at the table at the wedding. Was these mandates, and everyone at that table had some kind of effect, and because they were running these bigger type organizations with lots of employees, where it certainly is a definitive effect on them if in fact they have to abide by it.
We spoke a little offline. You told me a little bit about your peers. You had a friend in the trucking industry and different industries who are really concerned about this, particularly people with big employee bases who will actually have to physically impose this mandate. How do you see this thing playing out over the next 12 months?
That industry was hit already in an insanely difficult way. I mean, the shipping business it's all over the news almost every day, it seemed. And I was talking with a good friend of mine about this, and he was literally like, you could see this. He sounded distraught in his voice. He was so upset because he had this fabulous, successful company doing fantastically, and now you've just got this compounded issue of all of these things piling on, and then how is he managing And I asked that question, like, how are you managing this? I'm like, on top of what was already happening with finding, employees to come and drive the trucks and fill the shifts, the weekend shifts, the night shifts. These businesses are normally running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He can't even get day shift finished right now. And it's for a litany of reasons. And one of them is the one we're discussing. I will tell you that I think there will be a definitive fallout from this continually in the next year. I'm interested to see how 2022 shakes out, because I do believe these challenges are going to push forward into the next fiscal period, and we're going to see some really obnoxious fallout, in my assessment, just from having conversations with people that are boots on the ground running these types of businesses. I'm hopeful and optimistic that there'll be some resolution that will allow for the wheels of our economy to continue to turn the way that we're used to. But there's several. I think Ray Dalio just said recently that things will never be like they were before, pre-COVID. I mean, it's just the whole business world, the climate has changed so much. And there's probably some truth to that. I just hope that we adapt and iterate properly to get it to a place where the conclusion feels the same.
It's pretty concerning. Eric Casaburi, Serotonin Anti-Aging Centers, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And production at U.S. factories fell the most in 7 months in September. Car manufacturing is still affected by the ongoing global shortage of semiconductors. It's just further evidence supply constraints are hampering economic growth. Manufacturing output dropped 0.7% for the month. Data for August was also revised down to show a 0.4% drop instead of a gain. Production at auto plants fell even more, tumbling over 7% after a 3% drop in August. Overall car production volume was at its lowest since April 2020. Production was also weighed down by the lingering effects of Hurricane Ida, which severely disrupted output at mines. And former Secretary of State and retired General Colin Powell has died at the age of 84. His family said he died of COVID-19 complications. Powell was fully vaccinated against COVID-19. He was receiving care at the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. Powell was born in 1937 in New York City's Harlem. His 35 years in the Army included 2 tours in Vietnam. He was part of 3 presidential administrations where he held positions including National Security Advisor, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Secretary of State. Powell was a Republican, but he had grown disenchanted with the party. He even appeared at the Democratic National Convention in 2020 to endorse then-candidate Joe Biden for president. And the White House doesn't seem worried about opposition to a new proposal that would send basically every American's banking activity to the IRS. It says the opposition is mainly from big banks that are trying to protect their wealthy clients. But the rule would apply to any bank account with more than $600 in transactions each year, not just big accounts. The White House is also accusing banks of being unwilling to do the extra paperwork involved in the new rule. The rule is part of the massive $3.5 trillion spending bill put forward as part of President Biden's Build Back Better agenda. So joining us to discuss the new proposal is Paul Mirsky. He's the VP of Congressional Relations with the Independent Community Bankers of America. Paul, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming on and speaking with us. Just how will this burden smaller community banks that are already facing really tough circumstances as it is?
Well, this proposal for new bank IRS reporting on virtually everyone's bank accounts will be a massive burden. It's something that banks do not do right now, so they would have to implement new computer software, new programming, new hardware, and even adding staff to comply with this massive new mandate. You would be collecting data on everyone's inflows and outflows of their bank accounts. And people have multiple bank accounts, small business accounts, checking accounts, student loan accounts, all kinds of accounts. And all of that information would be sent to the IRS. And you'd have to make sure that that was also sent to the customers so they would have a duplicate copy. It's a massive new burden. And everyone's trying to figure out why the IRS needs such a blanket reporting on everyone else's financial accounts in America.
I think a main reason why a lot of people will go to a smaller independent bank is because of the more personal, maybe even more private service, or you feel more secure dealing with somebody who's independent. How do you think the customers are going to feel? And do you think it might push them into more alternative forms of banking? We have crypto banking and different forms of banking at the moment.
Well, one thing that community banks do is protect their customers' privacy. Everyone has a right to financial privacy. And this new IRS snooping proposal, where you'd be reporting the information on everyone's bank accounts, violates that trust that people have in their banks, that their information is safe, their data is safe. It would be very troubling to see the IRS collecting billions of pieces of information. The IRS already has a very poor track record of keeping people's information private and safe.
We have central bank digital currencies are a big thing coming, and basically some people describe them as, everyone has an account with the central bank. You can almost cut out the intermediary banks in the meantime. Are you afraid that at that point that everybody will just have their data and their transactions and everything available to the IRS and the authorities in real time? Is this a progression towards there, do you feel?
Well, one of the big fears of this IRS snooping proposal is that you're going to force and push more people out of the mainstream banking system. You have a lot of individuals that recently came from other countries, dictatorships. They don't trust the government to be snooping on all their financial information, and people will figure out ways to move their money to cash, push them out of the banking system, cryptocurrencies, you name it. That the last thing we should be doing is pushing people out of the mainstream banking system. One of the goals in Washington is to bring more people in, more unbanked, underbanked people into the banking system. This proposal is a disaster for that effort. It would force more people outside of mainstream banking.
Incredible. Paul Mursky, Independent Community Banks of America. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And China's economy has hit its slowest pace of growth in a year, pummeled by power shortages, supply chain bottlenecks, and a property market slowdown in the third quarter. Data released today says GDP grew just 4.9% in the third quarter, missing analyst forecasts. China's economic recovery is losing steam. Industrial output is slowed to a crawl thanks to power rationing triggered by coal shortages and massive flooding over the summer. Meanwhile, major developer Evergrande is still struggling with more than $300 billion of debt. There are global worries about a possible spillover of credit risk from China's property sector into the wider economy. And the U.S. Coast Guard boarded a container ship over the weekend that caused an oil spill off the coast of California. The Coast Guard says the ship dragged its anchor too close to a subsea pipeline. The companies that operate and own the ship were named parties of interest in the oil spill before the Coast Guard boarded. Pipeline owner Amplify Energy says the pipeline was pulled like a bowstring and ended up 105 feet from where it should have been. The Coast Guard says the investigation is ongoing and that multiple pipeline scenarios and additional vessels of interest continue to be investigated. And Porsche introduced its first electric vehicle just 2 years ago. Now it's already outselling Tesla and its own flagship sports car. NTD's Christina Kim has more.
Porsche's first electric car is outperforming Tesla. The German automaker's Taycan model has outsold the Tesla Model S and X by more than 2-to-1 through the first 3 quarters of 2021, and the brand's overall sales rose 13%. One industry expert says Tesla's up against Porsche's long brand heritage and high quality.
The Porsche Taycan, so you have a lot of a big buyer base, of course, behind that. Plus, it's more of a household brand name than Tesla.
In the first 3 quarters of this year, Porsche delivered about 29,000 Taycans globally, which are offered as a sedan and wagon. That's compared to 13,000 Tesla Model S sedans and Model X SUVs in total. The Taycan also outsold its flagship 911 gas-burning sports car in the first 9 months of the year. Alex Partner Research says electric vehicles account for about 2% of all vehicle sales worldwide. One industry expert says the main barrier right now to widespread adoption of electric vehicles is the charging infrastructure.
Unfortunately, while they're very cool, they're very quick, they're just not super practical, especially if someone does a lot of driving, waiting. Even the quickest chargers, you can charge a couple 100 miles in, around 20, 30 minutes. That might just not be an option for you, to sit around and wait for 20 minutes, to charge your car.
The share of electric vehicle sales worldwide is expected to increase to about 24% by 2030. Christina Kim, NTD News.
Looks nice. And still to come, a Tennessee town that has caught the interest of Hollywood producers is now up for sale. What does it include and how much is it selling for? And tea time with a modern twist. One theater in London is hoping it'll help draw crowds back after months away. That and more coming up on NTD Business.
%90 of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board. In every country communism gains power, authoritarianism and death followed in its wake. As an investigative journalist, I want to understand why.
Welcome back. Scientists have found evidence of water in the atmosphere of Jupiter's icy moon Europa. NASA says the Hubble Space Telescope observed the presence of water vapor over a large area of the moon's atmosphere. Interestingly, it was only present in one hemisphere. It's unknown why that's the case. Researchers used Hubble's ultraviolet imaging to make the discovery. NASA says Europa has a very smooth surface and its solid ice crust looks like a cracked eggshell. It says scientists are almost certain that the interior has a global ocean with more water than found on Earth. Could possibly harbor life as we know it. Keep you updated. And a historic Tennessee town is on sale for $720,000. Pretty bargain. It's an hour from Nashville and it's been sold at least 4 times, but Water Valley hasn't been considered a town since it sold its post offices. The town is only 7 acres. The real estate broker handling the sale told Fox News she has received many offers. Locals like the idea, and Hollywood producers looking to use the town as a movie set have also shown interest. The town is located along a highway. Purchase includes some buildings, a creek, a barn. The seller says the lucky buyer could be their own mayor, antique store owner, and barkeeper. County officials would even still handle the roads and water. The town dates back to at least the 1890s and at one time was known for its apple orchards. And an elaborate afternoon tea is the latest ploy to lure people back to London's theatres. Drawing on the decadence of the Regency period, one theatre is serving tarts, cakes, and more. NTD's Neil Woodrow in London takes us there.
The most fitting place to enjoy a rich chocolate cake with quirky green and pink icing must surely be a sumptuous Regency setting. And now the Theatre Royal Drury Lane is making that happen. With a modern twist on the outlandish desserts of the early 1800s, such as sticky toffee puddings filled with custard, this new Regency-themed afternoon tea gives a nod to the past and the future. It's the brainchild of baker Lily Jones.
I wanted to create an afternoon tea that was really modern and really fun, decadent, but full of things which are really delicious and things that people actually want to eat in 2021. So kind of scrapping the rule book a little bit on the tradition-bound afternoon tea. So there's no sandwiches, we've got sausage rolls, we've got a slice of cake, and yes, it's very beautiful.
One of the highlights is a handmade Regency-style ice cream trolley, serving a new spin on exotic ices of the times, a heady absinthe mint chocolate chip in shell-shaped bowls. With glittering chandeliers and pink and green marble, the Grand Saloon has benefited from the theatre's £60 million refurbishment. Madeleine Lloyd-Webber wants the afternoon tea to match the standards of the decor.
And we want to, with Drury Lane, set the bar extremely high. I want to be the first 5-star theatre destination in the world, frankly. And I'd like our teas to be a magnet. I want people to go to the theatre, have afternoon tea before or after, or just come to this beautiful set of rooms and have a luxury tea. And they don't need to go to the theatre, but it brings people into the West End.
London's West End has been hit hard by the lockdown. An industry report says UK theatre organisations lost almost £200 million by March this year. Amongst the cautiously optimistic are experts like Matthew Hemley of The Stage, a newspaper that covers the entertainment industry.
I think right now the outlook for theatre is very positive, and what Theatre Royal Drury Lane is showing is theatres having to think outside of the box a little bit more about how they get audiences back through the doors. And the Theatre Royal Drury Lane is a great example of that, because they're not just thinking about the shows, they're thinking about audiences coming to see the theatre itself, to have afternoon tea, to have a drink on the terrace. So theatres are having to think much more broadly about what they can offer audiences.
Afternoon tea in the Grand Saloon at the Theatre Royal Drury Lane opens on Monday, October 18th. Neil Woodrow, NTD News, London.
That's the latest business updates for today, but you can still catch NTD Evening News with Stephanie Cox. That's at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. For NTD Business, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Don't forget to catch all of our programs on TV. NTD Evening News is on every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Find your local NTD channel at ntd.com/TV.